I don't believe climate change matters. And I have 4 topics for my argument. So, first of all, I want to point out that I'm not a climate change denier. Yes, we changed the climate. That's like 3rd grade stuff. That's kind of obvious. But how we change the climate doesn't particularly matter. And so the first reason is that we change the climate to suit our needs. And so many people believe that changing nature is inherently wrong. Well, if your perspective is that of nature, that you care about nature more than humans, and for me, I place humans above nature. Why? Because I'm human and I want to survive. I'd like to keep my house. I'd like to still have electricity. I'd like to still have heating. I'd like to still have running water. Yes, I want it. Whereas the argument that we shouldn't change nature because nature is good, that's not a humanistic perspective. It's just simply, you're not fighting for humans. You're fighting for the earth. The second reason why I don't think it matters very much is because what we've been doing, predominantly switching to renewable energy, is that this affects poor people disproportionately. As in, it affects them negatively. Poor people cannot afford renewable energy sources because renewable energy sources are more expensive. And when you have a poor person who has the choice between electricity from windmills that is 2 times more expensive than the regular electricity, guess what? They're going to take the regular electricity. They don't give a shit that this was from windmills because poor people are only thinking about their own survival. And well, that's kind of obvious, right? And the number one predictive factor for how much a society thinks about the environment is how wealthy they are. As you raise the wealth of a population, they will naturally care more about the environment. Why? Well, because you're no longer thinking about your own survival, you're thinking about future generations. And you don't want your child to live in a climate that is unsuitable to live in. And that's why they care. But if you don't get to the point that you're just above surviving, you will never care about the environment. Number 3 is that the facts, quote, facts, are wrong. This whole thing about 95% of climate scientists agree that climate change is happening and it's bad. Maybe not that's happening, but that it's bad. That statistic in itself is fake. The data was faked. 95% of climate scientists do not believe that climate change is bad. I'm willing to bet that they do agree that the climate is changing. But probably not most of them, probably not all of them believe that it's bad. For example, there is a desert, either the Gobi or Sahara Desert, I don't remember which one, but the desert is becoming greener. Plants are growing in the desert. And I think from a humanistic perspective, that is absolutely amazing. Furthermore, there are models created to basically see the CO2 emissions. And those are completely useless because they aren't accurate. And they haven't been accurate whatsoever. They are absolutely useless. So any argument based off of these models is completely null and void. Furthermore, CO2 is not even the most harmful gas. You want to talk about harmful gases? You want to go to methane. Methane is so much worse in terms of retaining heat than CO2. And so much of these, quote, facts just are not true. They simply just are not. And my fourth argument is the hypocrisy, the virtue signaling, and the politics of the topic. The people who are talking the most about saving the planet are typically politicians. And guess what politicians do? They fly around the country and around the globe pretty much constantly. And what does that do? It releases a shit ton of gas from the planes. So the people who are arguing for this are hypocritical themselves. They aren't driving down their own emissions. They just aren't. They don't care. Well, they care to signal that they are virtuous. They care to tell everyone how good of a person they are. But otherwise, they don't give a shit about the environment. It's just a talking point. It's just a selling point for them. with all of this in mind, do I think that we shouldn't do anything about the environment? No, I absolutely think that we should take care of the environment so that we can survive. And that also includes changing the environment to suit us better. Back to CO2. Like, the entire thing with CO2 is like a null and void argument for me, because back in, I forgot which era, but the CO2 levels back then were so much higher, and they had so many plants. It was crazy. And this is just like from basic science. Plants need CO2 to grow. They get their energy from CO2 and the sun and water. This is basic photosynthesis. 6 CO2 plus 6 H2O plus sunlight equals 1 piece of glucose plus 6 molecules of oxygen. Like, this is something that kids learn in middle school. Yeah, middle school. If not middle school, then high school. And one of the arguments is that rising temperatures will cause the ice caps to melt and therefore basically raise sea levels. And yes, that is a concern. And at the same time, humans are inventive. We will invent new ways of conquering the weather. It's what we've been doing all this time. So, for me, I am particularly hopeful in that we can devise solutions to future problems. And furthermore, the most impactful environmental thing that could happen is not the planet becoming hotter. Rather, it's the planet becoming colder. Because people die from the cold. Not many people die from it being too hot. Now, of course, it does happen. But if we were to go into an ice age, billions would die. Compared to the consequences of, let's say, that we don't develop any countermeasures to rising sea levels and the coastal cities get wiped out. That is still incomparable to the billions that would die from an ice age. So, from taking a greater look into this stuff, climate change activists it doesn't make sense to me anymore. And I think that everyone believes they're well-intentioned. But just because you believe something does not mean that you're correct. Does not mean that your actions are going to be good. And so, that is my 4-pointed argument against why I don't believe climate change matters. It exists. It just does not matter.